We are on the lunch break on the second day of questioning of the Undercover Police Detective Chief Inspector Keith Edmondson at the Undercover Policing Inquiry. He has been having further questions about his time as head of the unit. He's been questioned about the deployment of Trevor Morris, about the way in which HN1 misled the court, something he claims wasn't really a problem.
No, it should be an issue. You know, like what difference would it make if someone is like a police officer or an undercover officer or an activist? It's just a witness. And he just, you know, like he was specifically asked several times, like, are you really saying this? That's not an issue. Like using a different name and, you know, hiding your identity in front of the court is not an issue. And that certainly raised an eyebrow.
I mean, he really failed to read the room. Mitting intervened, asked him again, pointed to the policy document again, but he maintained his position. You know, when it was said it's against SDS guidelines, he said, well, that doesn't apply to me, which was, I mean, just
that
weird.
Kind of sums it up. There's no rules, there's no limits, there's no boundaries. They could just do anything they wanted to. And, you know, it was put to him, you know, several times about Black family justice campaigns where an undercover officer was in the room, or it was reported on, where there was clearly, you know, like a picket of a Black family in front of a police station. There's no violence involved, no risk. And he just kept saying, of course we report on this, because it could have been a danger, could have been a public order situation, could have been, this is just the work we do. That was like sort of his main thing. This is the work we do as the SCS, as special branch.
Yeah, I mean, in some cases we were shown the report of a vigil, and it was pointed out there was no disorder, there was no possibility of disorder. And he said, well, this may have been relatively peaceful. And it just like, come on, man.
Sort of implicate. I don't know. There was, no. There's another topic.
There is like a constant theme of when he is being presented with documents that are being referred to, he insists on reading them in full. I think it's worth like underlining these are documents he was meant to have read at the time, but also have been disclosed to him in advance of these hearings for him to be familiar with them before he's asked questions on them. He sits there demanding to read every word, using his finger sometimes to follow what it says, claiming he can't remember them. Has he ever read anything? We've heard already that in order to get on in Special Branch, it was necessary either to be a Freemason or involved in the rugby team. All I can say is he must have been a fucking good rugby player, because I cannot see otherwise how he's ended up in such a position of influence and in senior management of SDS.
Yeah, it's really incredible how he... do you really think he hasn't read them before? Like, it reminds me of Bob Lambert, who would also sort of... find all kind of ways to waste time.
Sure.
Just, you know, like the more time is wasted reading, the less questions can be put to you. So I was putting it in that context, but I don't know. It's like really.
I mean, to be fair to Bob Lambert, once he got that extra time, he managed to come up with some sort of bullshit answer. Keith Edmondson is not kind of creating any, like he is not answering, like he doesn't have. He's just doing so badly at it. He's doing so in his own terms. He is so bad at this. It's pathetic.
Well, the only conclusion you can come to is that there was no management. They could there were no rules, there were no boundaries. They just did whatever they wanted to do, and the manager really turned blind to it. That is the only conclusion you can come to.
Yeah. Before I just want to touch on something. Before we did the video this morning, there was a breach, or there was claimed to be a breach. It turned out to be no breach. There was no order given out, so we can actually talk about the thing that I thought I wasn't allowed to talk about during the morning breach. This related to the comments of Paul Condon, and now Baron Condon, who will be giving evidence to the police inquiry in sometime later this month or next month. That all members are Black, which was a comment he made very soon after the brutal murder of Joy Gardner. And we saw a an SDS report from Trevor Morris, the only black officer at the time, infiltrating the Justice for Joy campaign, saying that these comments had fueled the campaigners, and it was now that the Justice for Joy campaign was now more an anti-police campaign than anything else. Keith Edmondson says that Trevor Morris came to him about these comments and said that they need to be looked at, and he had a debate with him, and they both agreed that Paul Condon was probably right, but that it had an effect on community relations, and that Trevor Morris asked him to go to the commissioner and raise with the commissioner that this wasn't right and that he needed to do something to mend relations. He said that he actually didn't do this. He mentioned it to some assistant chief constable. Somebody else in senior management, whose name I didn't note down because I thought that was the breach, to be perfectly honest, which he then didn't follow up. The fact that there was a vexatious, malicious claim of there being a breach when there was no part of what was being said that could be deemed as a breach in any sense, I think is once again a sign that the police lawyers are attempting to prevent the broadcast of the most embarrassing parts of the evidence being presented by their officers. There was no reason for that breach. It was a waste of everybody's time. It had the effect of suspending the broadcast for about 20 minutes, losing that whole section where, quite frankly, Keith Edmondson embarrassed himself. He showed himself to be an unreformed racist, both at the time and now. This is something that has happened systemically throughout the undercover policing inquiry. The state lawyers use the ability to stop the broadcast by claiming there's a breach in order to prevent certain things being put out there. It's incredibly frustrating as someone who's trying to follow the inquiry and report on what's being said. It's happened again. I want to pay tribute to Sir John Mitting for not being bullied and not making an order, but it really needs to stop. I mean, I feel that the inquiry legal team do bear some responsibility for bringing what is obviously a nonsense claim of a breach to the chair's attention. I think they're being overzealous in this matter, and they need to consider what they're doing.
Well, the name, which was Howley, clearly isn't secret. It was just, it was someone higher up in the hierarchy, and I think the breach was that.
Well, there was no breach.
No, there was no breach. But what the police lawyers fell over was the fact that Edmondson said that Trevor Morris was the only black officer on the team at the time, which is widely known. I think he said that himself, and it's in the public domain, and it's like as if we don't know. There weren't more black officers at the time, and they had a really difficult time to find more because there were not many black officers on special branch at all, because of all the racism that we hear from Edmondson that wasn't there.
I find it particularly frustrating, obviously, because I'm quite affected by these breaches and my ability to report, but I just wanted to get that out there. Other than that, I think Edmondson's answers have been very frustrating to follow. It's the same pattern we've been talking about for the last 2 days of how he's approaching this process. He's constantly being asked, well, show me where I was implicated in some way. For example, we were shown the disciplinary process for Mike Chitty, which was something which was Edmondson's responsibility as soon as he came into the unit. He claimed to have no memory of it. He said, yes, he knew it was famous. It was a famous thing, this Mike Chitty. He said it was notorious. This unique event that an undercover police officer involved in animal rights had sexual relationships with those he was spying on. And just a one-off. Must have been just a one-off.
Never happened before.
So he didn't consider it worthy or necessary for him to act in any way about.
No, because that wouldn't fit with him not knowing about any sexual relationships on the unit and never talking about it. So it should have been a huge warning message for the unit and a moment in time to start talking about it. But obviously he didn't, because he could hardly remember it, and which is nonsense, because it was a big thing.
And I mean, you definitely get the impression that his only real defense is that he wasn't really doing the job.
Yeah.
I mean, that essentially.
It's quite open about that now.
But he keeps saying, "Oh, I would have obviously read it because I read everything. When I came into the unit, I read everything.
I can't remember.
I can't remember it." And he's told that he would have. We've seen numerous documents that it's signed off as "you've written it." And he was like, oh, well, I mean, I don't think that would have been the case. I think somebody else would have written it on my behalf and I would have signed it. And I was like, yeah, that sounds about right, Keith. I believe that. I believe that you wouldn't have written anything.
Do a thing.
No.
You really wonder what the managers did at the time, apart from having coffee and having wet lunches and
remembering the time that he was a phenomenal rugby player who really, really like kind of gained loads of support of the people he played around, and he essentially got his career off the back of it. We've had a comment here from Campaign Opposing Police Surveillance. The management of the alleged breach this morning was particularly shocking. No announcements, just some sounds of slamming and banging from the front of the room. From the public gallery at the back, it honestly sounds as if a low-key fight of some sort had broken out. Yeah, it was unique, actually. We haven't had that before, where somebody, some sort of supposed paralegal, went round and started slapping down the laptops that show the transcript that are on the desks of the various lawyers. I mean, starting at the very front, so it's the inquiry legal team themselves and the lawyers.
Even when before Sarah Hemingway had been, told that there was probably was. It sounded really like two big binders had fallen to the ground, or someone had fainted, or it was we've never had that.
No, it's normally a very civilized affair. There's I'm asking you to rise from the counsel to the inquiry to the chair. The chair says, oh, why is that? There's been a breach. And then things.
Yeah, and then the transcribers start walking around and closing the laptops with the transcript, but in a very, as you said, civilized way. And this was like, well, we had one yesterday that was called Red Alert. I don't know. This was sort of
Red Alert inside and out today.
Yes.
Yeah, hot outside and Red Alert inside. I mean, it seemed an incredibly childish and over-the-top reaction, quite frankly.
Yes, it was.
We'll be back this afternoon with more questions for Keith Edmondson. It'll be the last of his questions today. Is there anything else? Anything you're looking forward to? Anything you want to add about what we've heard?
Not really.
Fair enough. All right, thanks for joining us. We'll be back again during the afternoon break and at the end of the day with a few more people. Bye for now. Oh, please like, share.